very interesting topic. What it is all about data, how we can use the data, how we can uh, pull the data together, how can we use it, how can we package it, how can we communicate it, basically on this. So Sa-Dhan has been doing the capacity building webinar, series of capacity building webinar for our members. And we have seen good number of people have participated. And today also we are seeing, we have actually invited those people who are basically dealing with the data and information. So the number of participants may be little bit less, but we are looking forward for the meaningful impact. So, in this our meeting, this our webinar, Action is our partner, and we have already done some webinars with Action, and we'll be working together for a lot many things. And Action has the experience of Indian market and also international market on different areas. One of those, like their study, then in their strategy, then they do have technology, they do have and they do have knowledge on the process. So all these things they do have, and we wanted to bring some of their ideas that how microfinance industry can use their own data. How can they bring the data together? How can they use that data for fundraising, for communication with other stakeholders? Because what we have seen over the period of time, that microfinance institutions, they are very good in implementation. Their repayment is also very good. Their activities, apart from some black sheeps, their activities on the grounds are also very good. They do have heart for everything apart from data. They have the data of like their dispersal, they do have the data of their repayment, but they don't have, especially the mid segment and the lower, like the smaller segment, they don't have much idea about that, how to package that data, how to communicate to the third party on those data. So we would be looking forward from Axion to help us to understand those aspects, and I'm quite sure it will be helpful for our members, and definitely from Sa-Dhan side we will also learn. Thank you very much for your support. So over to you, Axion team.
Thanks, I will thank for the introduction. First thing, to set the context, all the things that Saibal said are very important, and it's a huge topic to be covered in the first webinar on data, which is 45 minutes that we have. So today we'll discuss the basic foundational things of jumpstarting the data journey for MFIs, and how do we set the foundations right, and then we go ahead and do a lot of things in future, most of the things that you spoke about, Saibal. And so that's our topic, jumpstarting the data journey for microfinance institutions. And from Axion, it's just one second. You have two speakers, which is one is me. I'm Devika. I'll give a quick introduction. I've been working in financial inclusion industry for over 14 years now, and at Axion for more than 4 years. I started my career in operations in SKS Microfinance, then in now BFIL, and then moved to ratings in MCRIL, advocacy in MFIN, and then right now in Axion. I work as a senior advisor on data management and analytics in the advisory wing of Axion, which is GLAS, which we call as GLAS. Another speaker with me is Balaji. Balaji is an ex-CTO from Achievement and has more than 20 years of experience in banking and technology across various roles in solution and delivering. So a little bit very quickly about Axion. Axion is a global not-for-profit. I'll just switch off video because I'm facing issues here. Axion is a global not-for-profit, and we have been around for more than 60 years now. And our mission is to create a fair and inclusive economy where underserved people have quality financial choices and opportunities to improve their financial well-being. And our focus is, as I said, around a lot of things, investment and advisory, and also in advocacy through Center for Financial Inclusion, which we call CFI. So even though the topic today reads as jumpstarting the data journey for microfinance institutions, to be fair, data has been driving our business for decades. But what has changed now is one second, it's not moving idea. So what has changed now is that the quantum of data is much more. We are getting more and more digitized data and at a very fast speed. And now we have many more accessible tools to process and use this data. So now is the time to generate more data and use more data. So in our business of microfinance, data drives many of the key initiatives, be it digital transformation, basic operations, launching new products, increasing customer centricity, or reducing operational costs. And it's a fact that FSPs or financial service providers who have superior data capabilities will outperform their peers in driving any or all of their strategic objectives. And not just that, there is so much noise around data, around what data can do, that it is so overwhelming and daunting for organizations, especially the data teams. So today, through this webinar, we'll try to simplify the process of creating your own data roadmap. So creating a data roadmap for your own organization, how do we do that? And we'll do that by discussing the points that are written here. First, how do MFIs identify key problems that can be solved through data, how to prioritize them. And then once you know what you want to do with data, what data is required to solve that problem, how do you treat that data, what data skills and capabilities does your organization need, and what's the right technology or a partner to manage that data. And I'll hand it over to Balaji to start with this.
Hey, thanks, Devika. Can you just move to the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So predominantly when we initially spoke, right, the conversation was more around how do you productize the data offering that we have. And to start with, there is, since you said that there are the team is full of technologists, so we'll start with that as the first lens. That from a trend, right? So there are two ways of looking at it. One is what are the trends out there and what do we need to embrace? Because that then gives a sense of what should we productize. And if you look at the trends broadly, we've seen open banking, and in India especially, open banking has taken the shape of an account aggregator, ONDC. So there's a fair degree of data out there that we can use, right? And one of the things always which comes into our head as technologists is how do we kind of use that? The second piece that we've seen is that there's a fair degree of conversations which happened in the past on AI, ML, right? And the problem statement always is that as technologists, we have been asked, okay, what are we doing on AI, ML? And our CEOs always talk to us about it. And we're limited by not being able to answer those questions. So it's there, but then how do we use that? These are the two big trends. And the third is a case because of AI, ML and the case of open data that there's a fair degree of alternate data which is available out there. And the question therefore is, how do we kind of use that? And that's the landscape that we all see. And to the point, Saibal, that you're talking about, how do we leverage that? So while we see that as what the trends are, we still need to marry it with what the business is actually looking for. And the business goals have not kind of changed. So while as technologists, we want to do all of these interesting, jazzy things, the uptake and of it is going to be determined by what business problems or what business cases are getting solved. And which is why the crux of any productization or anything that we want to do, anything that we want to succeed, will need to have a lens of business, right? That's the key takeaway that I just want all of us to kind of think, as much as we're technologists, that we always need to have a business lens without which we're not kind of going to be successful. And as MFIs, all of us will also have value that we bring in the system by saying that, okay, we understand the MFI business well, and these are the problems or goals that we're trying to solve for. So quickly, if we look at the examples, now we're all comfortable or familiar with, at least the traditional model is about collections, about the efficiencies of our field officers. And that's the kind of starting point that we can typically play, right? And if you look at the whole digital transformation that we're talking about, that's the crux of where people are looking at maximizing the gains by leveraging data, which means that how do we move the business digitally, like digital repayments is one classic example that most of our MFIs are actually doing and talking about. And we've also been engaged in some of the clients where we're focusing our energy on actually driving the adoption by the end customers of doing digital repayments, right? So that's one place where we could look at an area that we should focus on. The second area is on revenues, right? So many of the MFIs, when you speak to business stakeholders, you'll find many of them actually talking about how do I increase my customer base, and how do I sell more? How do I actually offer him a new set of product services, right? So that whole angle of expanding the customer segment into larger ticket sizes in the case of MFIs. And as MFIs graduate into SFBs, like small finance banks, and some of you may also think about doing that, would be about how do I give him a different product, right? Maybe a housing loan, maybe a construction, home improvement. But it's more around the area of increasing the customer product portfolio for a particular segment. So that's a second angle of how do you grow the revenue. And there's a whole play of data that it comes into focus, which is around trying to understand the customer segment, trying to understand its customer behavior, and how do we lend to this customer or in a totally different product offering. The third, and you've seen a couple of examples out there. One of the classic example in MFIs is the graduation model, where we use data to look at what has been his past behavior to then see whether he is capable of getting a larger ticket loan, right? So that's kind of one product that that data can help deliver. The other angle which I kind of see happening is a lot on the collections efficiencies itself, and that's been there at a layer wherein currently many MFIs actually have a good dashboard around collections, right? So you have PAR, you know how they're doing, but very little in terms of being able to manage the whole cost of collection, which basically means not calling everybody, not meeting everybody, not going door to door and collecting money or calling them for group meetings. So how do you understand the behavior of this repayment to then say that this is the risk profile, and therefore we do not want to call or talk to everybody, right? And therefore driving this whole concept of interesting concept of collection scorecards. And one of our custom clients that we're working with, we've actually put a collection scorecard in play to just see that we don't really reach out to everybody for sake of repayment. So these are broadly the principles in terms of how do we do data projects and leverage data for the sake of arriving at a business goal. Now, the question then comes to us, Devikas can move to the next slide, is there is so much to do and what do we productize, right? And this is the framework that we typically use and as an exercise to then say, so we are a small tech team, let's say all of us, and we've got, let's say 4 or 5 people, we've got a service provider, but there is so much that we can do with data. There's so much data out there and there's so much that we can do, but what do we choose to do? And this is the framework that we typically use in terms of prioritizing data initiatives. So on one axis, we'll just spend some time on this because this will be critical for us also to take the conversation on, if you have so many things to do, what should I productize? And therefore, the conversations are as follows, right? What is it as an organization are we comfortable doing with either our internal skills or with the strengths that we have or with the service provider? So that's on the axis, which is called ease of implementation. So there's simple and it goes up to complex. And on the other axis, we actually have the value to the business, right? So if you're actually commercializing anything, then this, sorry. Anybody's asking a question? No. So the other matrix is more around the benefit that is accruing to a business if it's internal. And if you're trying to create this as a product, then what is the revenue that is likely to come out of doing this business, right? So this is the two matrix, which is essentially a value versus ease of doing it. And we plot this along with, so these are sample initiatives. This is not comprehensive. So if you look at the previous slide, we looked at the business objectives, and based on the business objectives, we came to certain initiatives, right? As an example, if we are looking at digital transformation and then we're saying we want to launch a new digital loan, which is what everybody does, the underlying data initiative would be that I need to do a customer segmentation. I would need to possibly use alternate data for underwriting, and therefore you create a new underwriting score, right? So all these are data related initiatives that will support the launch of a totally new digital loan, and that needs to come from business, right? So that's one example. Now that particular example of set of data initiatives is extremely impactful. So if you talk to the CEOs, they'll say, okay, this is great, Mr. CTO or Mr. Data, please, you need to make this happen. So he puts great emphasis on this and you feel excited about it. You have the business support, but it's extremely complex, which means that it's going to take time for you to deliver, right? So it comes right up there. If you look at number 2, it comes right out there, which is more like complex and very high impact. And therefore, what it means is that in reality, you would not pick it up as the first point, but you would see that, okay, we should progressively deliver to that, right? Now, on the other extreme, which we've seen in many of the engagements that we're doing, be it some of these MFIs who want to drive digital repayments, and with the whole Beam and the whole UPI, which is supporting this, right? So there's a lot of data infrastructure and the whole UPI infrastructure in place. So it's very simple for us to be able to do that. So while from an impact, it's medium to low, because at the end of the day, it's where it is, but the implementation is relatively simple, and therefore it's easy or good for us as a data team to actually support that. Now, the reason I put it as low impact is because it's anyway going to be done operationally. But what we're trying to do from a data team is, so we've kind of done a couple of engagements with our MFIs, and what we see is that while there's a digital usage, we need to examine who's the customer and does he have is he digitally aware? Is he able to do it? So a lot of customer segmentation around the ability for him to use that particular digital repayment is what is required to be done, which is kind of the missing link. And the second is also about analyzing which districts or which parts of the segment is actually using it. So this is where the data kind of team actually helps in terms of trying to support driving digital repayments, as an example. Now, the third, I'll just take one more example. The third example we spoke about, the reason I'm picking this up repeatedly is because if you want to productize something, right, a thing which is simple and consistent across all MFIs is collections. And one of the things that you can productize is that having a customer risk profiling based on the collection repayment to then say that this is what we should be able to do. It's not very complicated. And that's something that as a data team, one can experiment with. Now, broadly, this is the framework that one uses for prioritizing the data initiatives. So this is the first part of the conversation to say, how should we look at what business wants? How should we look at what the data team should do, which will support what business wants? Having created this foundation, the next part will be about how do we now implement? Because now we're clear about what we need to do, but the biggest problem is always about how do we now execute what we want to do. Now, to talk about that, I would request Devika to take it from here.
Thank you. So when it comes to implementation at Axion, we always look at, when it comes to data projects, we look at 3 basic things. We try and keep everything very simple when it comes to data advisory. So first thing is data itself. Second is the team, the skills and capabilities. And third is the tech. So we'll start with data and data/data quality. So we heard about all the things the data can do for a microlending institution or microfinance institution. But one very important question is, if you select one of those use cases, what kind of data do you need to achieve those objectives? We'll go through this topic very briefly because it's very use case specific. So let's take an example. If one of your goals is, customer centricity, and you want a 360-degree view on your customer so that you can create products and services according to your customer needs, much more customized products. So what you need is to capture a 360-degree view of your customer, which involves their demographics, their digital readiness, usage of financial products, the marketing modes that they prefer, like social media platforms do they prefer. There are various frameworks that help you identify this, but we are going to go through this topic in our next sessions because it's very use case specific and organization specific. But what we will discuss in detail is favorite topic of all data people, which is data quality. So organizations, we all know that organizations whose data is in good shape can quickly do all of these things. And what does data in good shape mean? That your data is of good quality across the value chain. So it's not just the data that goes to the board or goes for compliance is of good quality, but data across the value chain is of very good quality. And how do we do that? Let's discuss some very data quality essentials. The first step, obviously, is you create a data quality framework. With our experience with microfinance institutions, especially group lending product, and this is a framework that has worked for us most of the time, that the data should be complete, the integrity of the data, validation, the most important point in our segment of customers is validation. The information that we are capturing, is it validated? The timeliness, consistency, and accuracy. So we check the data across the value chain for these parameters. What is important is that each use case may require fulfillment of only some or all of these data quality parameters. So if you are focusing on underwriting or automating your underwriting, if we go with that example, validation is the key, and that is where we get stuck the most. Or if you're talking about creating any kind of underwriting credit score, what happens is it requires predictive analytics. All our historic data or legacy data is pretty good at giving you trends. But when it comes to predict something, it fails us. And that's mostly because of the quality of the data. We all know that historically, the group lending data, all customers look pretty similar. The data that's captured is not validated. It's mostly assumptions. It's mostly guesses. So you might hire a very good expensive data scientist, and you might give them a project to create a very automated kind of lending or pre-approval lending product, but your data will fail you, and it's for sure because the data quality was not good. So as I said, you create a data quality framework across the value chain, which is at the point of capture, curation, storage, analysis, dissemination, and usage. You create a feedback loop to address the data quality concerns. Treatment of historic data, I mean, I've used the term treatment, but that does not mean you go back in past and you start curing your entire data set. But what you can do is mark it. You can assign tags and markers on what part of that bulk of data is useful and for what purposes, and how to use your historical legacy data. Then next step is conducting regular data quality audits across regions to identify which sections or which parts of your organization have adapted to this good data quality capturing and which ones are lagging, and then of course train and upskill them. Another thing that has really worked for our partners when they've embarked on this journey of becoming a data-driven organization is including data quality KPIs. Data quality is a KPI at the point of data generation for their loan officers, for their branch managers, wherever data is getting captured. Data quality is one of their KPIs on which their performance is measured. And of course, training and upskilling goes for everything. So if you want to do any data project which requires any kind of predictive analytics, you need to have very, very good data quality. Having said that, for everything, we need a good data quality maintained across the value chain. So now, since we've discussed data and data quality, the next step is your people. I see there's a question in the chat. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so before we move ahead, if anybody has any questions on data quality and they're facing any challenges, they can ask me right now, or we can move ahead. But I can discuss one of the top challenges that I have faced at Axion when we create credit scores or any underwriting models that we have faced is, as I said, the historic data. So you want to create a model whether a person will pay in future or not, and you use the demographic data of your existing customers. at the economic activities, they'll never match the actual economic activities. Most of them will be trade. So we were assessing one of the data and we realized 80% of one branch's data was agarbatti making, and that's not possible. It's just not possible. So because of the way our systems were designed, because of the drop downs that they had, we always struggle with getting the quality data points to do anything with our data in future. I can't see the chat. Is there any question there? No. Okay.
No, there's no question. No.
Okay. Okay.
I think once you complete your
Okay.
presentation, there may be some.
Okay. So we'll move to the next aspect of implementation, which is the data capabilities and skills. We have identified what we want to do with data. We have created a framework to make sure good data is coming in. Now comes the people who are going to utilize this data, access this data, and analyze this data. So how do FFIs identify the right skills? So the role of data professionals is also changing with time, right? It's no longer a job you just do in isolation of a cave-in. So organizations are now looking for data professionals who also have a very good domain knowledge, and at the same time, business professionals who can also understand and use data effectively. So there's a huge demand for people who can demystify this data and put it in practical terms for usage. So different organizations take different approach on this. Like one of our partners that we worked with wanted to strengthen their internal team only. We knew that's not the absolutely correct approach, but we did follow that path, and we realized that not everybody can be upskilled. And there are so many new things happening in data field that ultimately we had to make a lot of changes in the team and get in new people with new skills. Similarly, there was another partner who wanted everything outsourced. There they struggled with domain knowledge. See, every organization has their business nuances, product nuances, the regions they work with, the areas that they're working with. And outsourcing all of that, it just backfired. It just went nowhere. So there's a very good balance that you need to maintain on how you create a data team. We'll talk about a very generic organization structure for data capabilities here. So overall, if you look at data roles, it comes under these two headings. One is the infrastructure part, where people are taking care of your tech, which handles data. So there will be people working on infrastructure, data governance. These are your IT people. Then you have a set of people under data infra who are the data managers, who manage this data. They'll work on your data warehouse design and implementation of data warehouse and your data lakes and your databases. And they're supported by the quality assurance team. So this is your data infra role. Then comes the second part, which focuses on analytics. So in analytics also, there is one business intelligence team, which will focus on your day-to-day operational intelligence, your on-time collection reports, your power in the branches, etc., and report it on daily, weekly, monthly basis. They'll be supported by visualization team who will visualize these in fancy dashboards and present it in the meeting. So that's one BI part of your analytics. Then comes the second part, which is a little more advanced analytics division, which is the predictive analytics. So here is where people are thinking of much beyond your day-to-day operations. These are the set of people who will analyze the data to create new products, to bring in process efficiencies. And these are the resources which are much more expensive than all the others written here on the screen. So having said that, this is the structure of the people you need. And of course, now almost all organizations have a chief data officer, and there are people who work on data from the strategy point of view. So you have domain experts and decision scientists there. So the board here more or less covers all the roles any lending institution would require to create a data team, but not all of it is needed by everyone. So here the green box, if you see the blue box here, this is the part which more or less 50-60% of it you can source from your current team and then hire more people as and when you expand your architecture. In the green part, again, your data reporting, BI, to some extent can be handled by your current team. But when it comes to predictive analytics, more or less, we have to recruit more people. We have to recruit new people. And these are expensive people. So depending on the use cases and the projects that you've decided for the coming 12 months or 3 years, you have to find a fine balance to create your data. Okay, so now we have the data, we have use cases, we are building a team. The next very important thing is that just because you hire a good team and just because you have a new vision of becoming a data-driven organization and you have the use cases, it doesn't happen overnight. So what you need is a very, very good governance.
Ajay, can you please flip back? Yeah. Can you please tell me this infrastructure and data governance? What exactly does it mean?
Can I take that question? So this is like a slightly large organization where there's an ability for us to break down the whole data team into two, right? One is the data platform, which is making sure that the underlying data infrastructure is in place. We are able to manage the data and we put appropriate controls around the data, right? Which is basically the data governance on the security controls, where the key would be to have a good view of what is the data, what is the criticality. So you have a whole measurement of what is the data, what is the criticality of it, and how we need to control.
Is it
How
like
does it?
more this technology side?
Yeah, so it's more technology with the layer of security, right? So basically, like for
Okay.
example, PI data, right? So we
Mm.
should not expose PI data. We should ensure that
Mm.
the data doesn't get stolen. The customer data has to be controlled. So that is the layer which is usually, the CTOs usually have that in some organizations, and the analytics part, which is more a business
Mm.
kind of a conversation, is kept outside. So the link where it kind of comes together is more at a data engineer layer, which is the data management layer. But otherwise, sometimes in some organizations, that whole data governance and security as an implementation comes under the data infra head. So usually the CTO will be the person who will have this kind of piece under him. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, so as I was saying that when you are embarking on a journey of becoming a data-driven organization and planning to do great things with data, it's very important to have a governance framework for your organization. The data is just not an IT team or data team's job, it's the entire organization's job. And if you are driving all decision making through data, it has to be top down. So the more and more senior management starts using, for example, you create a fancy dashboard, but it will never be used if it doesn't start top down. So if more and more the senior management teams and SMT meetings start using those dashboards or asking for data for every decision making, then it starts moving down the organization. So if once you embark on this journey, you create a clear vision and communicate to all your staff. There are ways like you create working groups, you can create data champions. There are ways around it to make data very interesting, and so that people, the whole organization is focusing on data. You create data specific KPIs from top to bottom and make people responsible for creating quality data and using it. And of course, as I said, providing training on data literacy, how to access self-service dashboard, analytics, etc. Anything that you're doing, just doing a quick training and refreshers and upskilling your business staff, not just data staff, upskilling your other teams on data skills. It always helps.
Yeah, just to add, if you were to borrow, probably the best person who's embarked on the data journey may not be an MFI, but just Bajaj Finance, right? And one of the key learnings for me personally when I visited them was that everything that they present in PPTs, in management discussions, is directly from the data store. So they just use, at that point in time, they used Tableau, and they just connect to the data store. And any dashboards or whatnot they had to see was all live, and they could just scroll. And no PPT. So everything was, even the PPT construct was such that everything was kind of picked up from that. So the limited point being that we can create data, but even dashboards, but the way to kind of use it top down, where management starts doing reviews, keeping direct dashboards in mind, as opposed to the current approach of cut paste of data from to make PPTs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, there, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So we discussed data and we discussed skills and team. Now to discuss the data tech, I'll hand it
Yeah, thanks, Devika. So the typical question is there are different data architectures, and as technologists, we always get into this bucket of do we need a data mart, do we need a data lake, do we need a data warehouse? So the starting point always is about trying to get a good sense of the data architecture. And if we internally don't have that skills, right? So the question to me is like, what are the pieces that we really need to look at internally versus what we need to outsource? And the starting point is obviously the right architecture for you as opposed to the technology and partner. And when I meant architecture, it is more to do with do we need to have a data lake? Do we need to have a data warehouse? Do we need to have Tableau? So there are a lot of these bunch of questions which uh, come to us, right? And that's where we have a very simple framework. Devika, if you can go to the next slide, please. Is that we just look at the various solution components. This is just a framework, so it's not like specifically calling out what we need to do. But if you look at the overall architecture, it starts with, obviously there are data sources, which could be structured, unstructured. So we need to ask this question, obviously, in terms of, are we kind of looking at both structured and unstructured data? Is it third party or is it only internal? I've kept that outside because that's the fundamental question. But the other elements from a data infrastructure starts with data integration, which is how do you get this data into the data store? And the biggest topic of discussion and debate is what is your data storage, right? So do I need to have, like I said again, data lake, or do we need to have just an ODS, or do we need to have a data mart, right? So the questions that we kind of typically need to ask is, what is the kind of amount of data that we have? Is it structured, unstructured? How long do we need to keep the data for? Is kind of the next logical question. Then the third would be around analytics, right? Uh, while we use the word AI ML, one is about, are we really going to use that? And if so, for what kind of analytics? Is it for scorecards? Is it for any cross-sell upsell? So what kind of analytics are we going to do? And what is underlying data? And finally, which is where the management is very excited about, is that how do I consume data? So currently, many of MFI, so I used to work in Ujjivan, and we used to typically give data, and people used to take the data dump and download it in Excel and then create visualization on Excel. It's not bad at all if the data size is not very big, and we're always consuming very little data, right? There's nothing wrong with it. So these 5 questions or a bunch of questions would help us in getting a sense of what kind of data infrastructure we need, right? Which is, what is the ETL tool? Do we really need to have an analytics workbench? So all those questions get answered through this framework. And that's the starting point of then saying, what kind of investment do I need to do in technology? Large organizations who typically, at least in the earlier era when RBI used to come down heavily on organizations, always used to have enterprise solutions on their platform. But so these are just samples. So if you look at the last column, it's more technology options. The list is endless. So these are sample examples. But the limited point is that we need to think of it in terms of what do we need for us. There's certain investment that needs to be done. And by and large, the quickest way to jumpstart a journey, because that's the conversation that we're having today, is to start with any cloud service provider, because many of these are readily available by cloud service providers, be it an AWS, be it a Google Cloud, be it Azure. So all of them have very similar, they have progressed a lot in kind of baselining data architectures already. So we don't need to break our head. A wall that we need is the ability to try and test with a business goal in mind, and also look at an internal capacity, right? So we look at service providers who are mapped to these cloud service providers, use them to kickstart the journey, but also build internal capability on some of the common technology. So one of the partners that we're working with actually is on AWS, just to be honest. But the skills that he's internally building is that of a data engineer, and also skills related to how do you use open source for some of the tools like uh, governance, some of things of data discovery, because those may not really be available. But how do you do data discovery? How do you actually do the whole management of security? So look at open source tools to integrate with the AWS infrastructure. So limited point is leverage for jumpstarting, leverage standard cloud infrastructure, look at your internal capability to then say which is the technology that we're capable with, and then look at what is the right size, right? So we don't need to kind of invest in heavy infrastructure to start with, because that can be a limiting factor when you kind of implement. Yeah, so that kind of broadly summarizes what we really need to do with reference to technology from a selection standpoint. Now, the final conclusion so far is like, having gone through the business objectives to define what we should be doing and where should data play, then assessing the prioritization to then say, okay, if we're going to productize something or if you want to take up something, how do we decide what we should do for? Talking about skills, we spoke about skills and what the organization basic needs. The question always is, okay, all this is fine, but where do we start? And the starting point typically is the data strategy or the roadmap, right? And that's where we start, and that's where we want to kind of have a more detailed conversation around it. I'll lead Devika to help us around it.
Yeah. So to kickstart the data journey, we said we need a data strategy. One of the most effective ways is to create a data strategy, a data roadmap for yourself. And to do that, it's a little prescriptive slide where we give 5 steps that you can use.
There is a request. There is a request to all of our participants that if you are not speaking, please do make yourself mute. Like Sangamitra. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So the first step is to align your strategic goals with data goals, which we discussed in detail today. Once you know what do you want to achieve with data, then the second step is to do a quick current state assessment. Where does your tech lie right now? What are the skills and capabilities your team has currently? What is the state of your data? There are many tools which we use. We use the data maturity diagnostic. We use the tech assessment, this tech assessment tool that we use. There are many tools that we can use to do this current state assessment. Third state is to map the desired state. So you know your goals. And to do this, it's very intensive. You speak with each user, with each department, and see what is it that they exactly want to do with data, and how is it helping them achieve their strategic goals, and what the desired state is. Once you know the desired state and what your current state is, then you identify the gaps and challenges and map that, and then create a implementation roadmap. So this is something that we've done with a lot of our partners, and it's very effective because after this exercise, you clearly know where you are and where you want to go in short term as well as in long term. And this is something that we started doing in a workshop mode to do a quick data strategy and then take it forward with a detailed implementation plan. Once you have a data strategy, comes the implementation part. So in implementation, we go into more details of things that we discussed today. Like once you have a data strategy, then what kind of infrastructure do you need? What kind of data do you need? What are you not capturing currently? How much of it do you need to, what data do you need to buy from outside? How much can you use the current bureau? In India, the bureaus are very good. So how do we use the bureau information? How do we make provisions for the information that's not available? Like we still know only 20% of formal lending goes into bureau, 80% is still informal and it's not recorded anywhere. How do we provision for things like that? What kind of how elaborate do we want our analytics and business intelligence team to be? So everybody needs real-time information now. So how would that analytics division look like? Then you are getting to the path of data driven decision making. So we don't only have to create information. Somebody should be there who converts the information into insights and insights into actionable items. So who will do that, and what's our path to achieve that? And then of course the governance and change management, because right now we know most of the microfinance institutions, our systems came in the branches first and then we got advanced in our head office. So most of the data, the branches achieve it first and then the head office achieves it, but we're slowly moving from there to real-time data processing. So it requires a lot of change. Each department, each team is used to crunching their own data and using it. What's your so you need to decide whether you want to go with a centralized approach or you want to still keep it decentralized, and that requires a lot of change management. And with the current policy and regulation and how strict RBI is about data sharing, data usage, having a very good data privacy and governance framework also helps. So this is more or less a broad framework of first we spoke about how to create a data strategy quickly and then how to implement it. And unless Balaji, you want to add something, that's all from us today.
Yeah, we just left some space for questions. So
yes.
anyone has any questions specifically to what we want to achieve out of this webinar? Yeah.
So anybody has any question? Like it's so compelling, this your PPT. I'm just engrossed in it. I mean, we are in from Sa-Dhan, we are in the thick of the thing. So most of the cases we can align ourselves, but this is a different kind of thing. It's really very good presentation. Thank you, Axion, for this one. Any of our colleagues have any kind of question?
Yeah, so we've left some email contacts. So if there's anything beyond, right? So I think we've gone beyond what we thought you were looking for. So it's kind of a canvas. So anything on prioritizing, any challenge that you're facing, please feel free to reach out to the email IDs that have been shared. We're happy to support you in any which way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do believe that we should have a kind of regional or national level workshop on this data.
Sure.
Yeah, physical one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's wonderful. So anybody? Most of these people are data management in one way or other.
Okay.
So
as Balaji said, if the question is not coming to your mind right now, you can always mail it to us.
Yeah.
Right. Agree. You can come back to us or direct it to this one. But as output, I could understand that, I mean, everything is so well presented and also like so insightful that we are, me and Sangeeta, my colleague over here, we are thinking to do a national level or zonal level this workshop for our data management team of the microfinance institutions. Sure. Yeah, that's what we are thinking. And also like it is so insightful. Possibly it will be much more in workshop mode than in training mode. They can develop their own strategy and everything. Okay, so I mean, in their workshop, they can develop their own like institution strategy and other thing. Do very good. Thank you very much for your presentation.
I think there's a question from Venkatesh. Devika, do you want to take that?
I'll take that.
Yeah, what is that?
The question is, are there any suggestions on how to manage quality of data at source based on your experience? So yes.
So I can give you two examples, right? So one is I'll give you again. I'm taking Bajaj Finance because for me they were the gods at one point in time. And one of the things that usually happens is that the customer data collected at the lead, right, was very critical because again, so the question is, data quality always needs to have a goal. And the goal in the case of Bajaj Finance is that we needed good quality of source data for the simple reason that prospecting data quality was bad. So they did that check to see that the data quality was bad. So what they then therefore did is they created a structure wherein people were informed or told that if the data was bad, they were told that the data was bad and they were disincentivized because that's the only way you could influence or change behavior of the data which is being collected at source. That's the one example that comes to my mind. Otherwise, again, Devika, please feel free. Yeah.
So considering our microfinance data, the problem is that most of our customers don't have anything to validate. So income proof is not there, tax proof is not sufficient to calculate income. So that is where the data quality issue starts. It's mostly because the information itself is not present. So there are alternate ways of doing it. There are a lot of process changes that we recommend, like Instead of noting down the Aadhaar number, you start scanning it through OCR, or you start doing a eKYC. Similarly, depending on your data goals, like for example, if the issues are that you're not capturing anything, like if when it comes to collections, you're not even capturing how many promises were made to pay and the partner and the customer did not pay. So most of the time we don't have information on who in the group frankly did not pay the money and somebody else is paying. There are a lot of issues that come up when it comes to group lending. So there are ways, but it's a very, very long discussion. I'll share my email ID and we can chat over a quick call on if you have any specific data concerns. There are ways to address, not 100% of that can be addressed. It's a very complex customer segment that we have, but most of it can be addressed and we can discuss in detail. And then you can write some scripts and add in your data to run it at the point of capture. So that also throws out a lot of discrepancies and quality. So as I said, there's several ways to work around it.
Thanks a lot, advice. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody has any question, please do come back to us or directly to Action. Action is also our member, so we work together. So it would be very good to be working together with our members and everyone. And it's a really very good presentation. Thank you, Action, for doing this one. It's very compelling and it's also very clear, that every step, everything, it was so much clear for everyone. I mean, for everyone possibly. Sweta is writing super presentation and very informative. So it's really very good. So thank you, Action, for once again, and also our members. And very interesting fact that whenever we do our this virtual training, we see that 20% of the participants drop in between. But here today we got 40 or 41 participants, only 3 dropped in between. It means that it's very effective and people really enjoyed this presentation. Thank you, Action team. And thank you,
for support.
Thanks
a lot for support, yeah, from everybody.
Again. Thank you.
We really want to take it forward, and thank you, my colleague Sangeeta, for organizing this one, and this regional colleague, this Matab is there, Karthik is there, Shobik is there, and Ambarish is there. So to take it forward, thank you very much. Looking forward to all of you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for everyone who joined. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I know it's been difficult after a long weekend, but thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you very much.